My muscle connection is not that relevant. Honestly, I can make a really crap movement feel fantastic just through my muscle connection. Doesn't change the fact it's a crap movement. For the first time in some time, we're going to take a step away from talking about bottoms and legs, and we're going to talk about the best exercises for capped delts. Because it's actually a really interesting one, because this is something I see people overcomplicate far more than it needs to be. When it comes to shoulder training and upper body training in general, but let's say especially shoulder training here, so many exercises are demonized and so many exercises thrown into the mix that just don't need to be there. So we're going to debunk some bits and bobs, and I'm actually going to tell you how to actually train your shoulders pretty darn effectively. But before we do so, there are actually two things. Firstly, tfnl clothing drops in just over a week, so if you want to get early access to that, because again it's going to be a very limited run, join the mailing list by clicking the link down below in the description or by going to tfnl.uk, because if you are on the mailing list you'll get a link 24 hours before clothing goes public, so you can get it before other people do, in case it does sell out that quickly, because there is a chance. In addition to that, if at any point throughout this entire video you actually just learned something from the video, I would very much appreciate it if you did subscribe to the channel, because as I often say, it does mean a lot to me. I really do need YouTube to believe I'm worth having around. But now we'll crack on with the video.
That's how you should be shoulder pressing. And when you have this slight angle, you're also able to take your elbows from this, your form from this to this. This is how you should be shoulder pressing. So everything's concentrated more so on your anterior and lateral delt. Actually
really valid. When shoulder pressing, firstly, the dumbbell shoulder press, banging movement, love it. Bit unstable, do prefer a machine, but I still love a dumbbell shoulder press, don't get me wrong. Couple of things there. The bench angle, where it's slightly knocked back, 100% back that, fantastic. When it's upright, it's just a really awkward pressing position to be in. I don't love it. Couple of things there about the arm angle. When the arm is directly out to the side, like let's say so, you will obviously work both the anterior and lateral delts. Further out the arm is, the more emphasis is going to be placed on the side delts there, the lateral delts, whatever you want to call them. When you tuck your elbows slightly forward, it does shift a bit of emphasis more over towards the anterior delts. And for me and a lot of other people, I also find it makes the range of motion a bit more comfortable. When I press directly out to the side, I can't really go very low. That's literally as far as I can go, which is fine. But if I want a bit more freedom of range of motion, I tuck the elbows slightly as she is doing here. I'm laughing. That range of motion, fantastic. I feel nimble. I feel like a ballerina.
So if you really want to see your delts grow and really like actually build nice, strong and like aesthetic delts, you really need to like drop the ego lifting, drop the heavy weight, pick up the light weights, more so go for volume than anything, and just really have controlled, steady form.
Dumbbell lateral raise, fantastic movement again. I love it. Machine, cable, dumbbell, your choice, whatever you prefer. You can either raise slightly out in front of you, like let's say here, or you can raise more out to the side. What I would say, both will train the lateral delts effectively. If you go a bit more out to the side, I do find the traps get heavily involved. If I can kind of tuck the arms slightly in front of me, just a hair, about 40 degrees or so, and aim to literally try and touch the corners of the rooms, I do feel like my traps get a little bit less involved, and it does shift a bit more emphasis over to the delts. What I would say, she mentioned about going for volume here. The exercise you're doing doesn't necessarily determine the volume. I think the volume is kind of universal to the muscle group of how many working sets to what intensity are you looking to do per week. I don't think the exercise is really that relevant there. And another thing, if you want to make it a little bit better, a little bit more stable, if you lean on like a chest support, like a high incline bench, and use that to support your chest, it does kind of almost counteract the swinging and the bad habits you might be adopting when doing movements like this. So yeah, I actually back it. This is good.
No leg movement, you're completely still. Again, ego lifting out the window. This is where you can't really like load on as much heavy weight as you would with a push press, like in a full body movement like that.
So the barbell overhead press, from a hypertrophy perspective, so purely looking at building muscle, I'm not really a massive fan. And this is where people go wrong. They think essentially just because you can lift a lot of weight on the movement, it suddenly means it's a good movement. So for example, you're going to barbell press more than you can dumbbell press, doesn't mean the barbell press is actually better. One thing I find when doing a standing barbell press is that I often see a lot of issues stemming from core stability and just strength. So the core actually ends up giving out before the shoulders do. If you're looking at effectively working the shoulders, you want the shoulders to be the limiting factor, not the core, because then you're taking emphasis away from what you're hoping to target. A seated barbell press, much more stable, a lot less core involvement, probably going to be better for building muscle. And then people obviously present to me, say, oh, but Harry, what about functional strength? How do you define functional strength? Surely all strength is functional. So I really like how people use that terminology. I just think, sure, the barbell press is cool, but I probably opt for it seated. And in that case, I probably actually favor dumbbells anyway. Just feels a bit nicer on the wrists as well, and just on my body in general. But again, that is purely preference. Very quickly, link down below, you know what's occurring. We've got the link to work with myself on a one-to-one basis where I can coach you online to your goals, whatever they may be and wherever you may be in the world. You've also got the link to download a TFNL workout guide, which also has the new nutrition guide in there, which not only tells you what to do, it tells you why you should be doing it, and also shows you how to do it too, which is pretty fantastic. You've also got the link to the TFNL team training, which for less than $1 a day, you can follow either a home workout program or gym workout program that I've created with the community, and you can interact with all of us, including myself, ask me questions, send me bits and bobs. It's bloody fantastic, and like I said, less than $1 a day. So if any of those things tickle your pickle, have a gander down below in the description and let that pickle be tickled.
I'm literally bringing the middle of the rope as close to my face as possible, and then I'm stretching all the way forward and pulling all the way back.
Again, I'm gonna have to disagree here because again, think a couple of things. For building muscle like hypertrophy, the rope face pull is a bit pants, to be honest. The other thing is when looking at like rear delts, which is what people often do the face pull for, is usually the rear delts, is your rear delts seem to be best targeted when you're coming down at this angle. So like when the arms and the upper arm is about 45 degrees. No, it doesn't have to be. It can be a bit higher, like 60 to 90, sure. But for argument's sake, let's say rear delts prefer 45 degrees. When you're doing a face pull, I don't know about you, but when I face pull, I think of hammering external rotation and aiming to hit my face. My elbows are up here. So if my rear delts prefer to be here, but I'm up here, doesn't really align with what I'm trying to achieve. Do I think the rope face pulls have a better use elsewhere? Absolutely. I think the external rotation aspect, which is essentially this part, this is external rotation, and when you're face pulling, you go like that, is good for shoulder health, depending on how you define that, but also good for injury prevention. When I was doing a lot of pressing patterns and bench pressing frequently, rope face pulls helped keep my shoulders a bit more sturdy, and we'll say resistant to injury. So from a rehab, health perspective, sure, but from a hypertrophy perspective, I probably wouldn't back it. I feel like a cable rear delt fly is probably going to be a better bet, personally.
I do a supinated grip, which is an underhand grip. A pronated grip, I feel like my mind muscle connection is going a little bit more towards my grip strength than anything. So supinated, I just feel way more comfortable doing it, and like all my tension, I can feel more in my shoulders.
A couple of things. My muscle connection is not that relevant. Honestly, I can make a really crap movement feel fantastic just through my muscle connection. Doesn't change the fact it's a crap movement, so I wouldn't deep my muscle connection too much. The other thing there is a front raise. Again, I don't really back it. So if you're doing enough pressing, like flat pressing, incline pressing, or even shoulder pressing, your anterior delts are probably getting more than enough stimulus. I have not done a front raise for years, and my delts are pretty well developed. If your front delts or your anterior delts are just, for whatever reason, really underdeveloped, yes, you can front raise to help bring them up, but that's probably not the case. And if they are, I'd probably stick to a dumbbell shoulder press or a machine shoulder press. But again, there's nothing inherently wrong with the front raise. I think it's a bit unnecessary. And this is where people kind of confuse it. Essentially, when I'm looking at the delts, I split into 3 sections. So front, side, rear, anterior, lateral, posterior. Those are the 3 heads of the delts. So simply just doing an exercise for each of them across the week is probably going to be sufficient. So a shoulder press, I would say, is more anterior lateral, depending on how you do it. We'll call it an anterior movement at this point, even though we know it does obviously work at the other heads as well. A side raise, fantastic, and a rear delt fly. If you do all 3 of those, you are fantastic. I don't do any shoulder pressing. I do 2 side raises and a rear delt fly. That's all my shoulder work for the week. And I split that across 2 sessions. So again, honestly, I do really simplify it to side raise, rear delt fly, shoulder press, boom, you're sorted. Do that once a week, you're probably good enough. You can do them twice a week if you want to, but it depends on your weaknesses. But honestly, it doesn't need to be that complicated. Does it have to be dumbbells? No, it can be variations of each. It can be dumbbell, cable, machine, of any of the things. So it really is just that simple. Nail those, do them to sufficient intensity, make sure the movement you're choosing to is pretty stable, so kind of seated if needed, machine if needed, things like that, and you're probably going to be flying. No spamming lateral raises will not give you cap delts. Trust me, it just doesn't happen, because that would imply that volume is really a big driver of growth when we know it's not. And also, a lot of that delt capping is going to be heavily genetic as well, so that's something to remember. And that's why I kind of set it aside. So many people overcomplicate it when it's actually not that complicated, and definitely doesn't need to be that complicated. Sadly, although simple is boring, simple is often effective. So if you do all those things to a sufficient intensity and get stronger, you're probably going to be fine. But again, like with all my videos, this is simply my opinion, and I'd like to hear your opinion in the comments below. So tell me, what is your favorite shoulder exercise? Because I'm curious. But until the next one, thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my waffle about boulder shoulders, and thank you for tolerating the video.